Hello, Ma'am Sari and everyone. Today we are going to talk about chapter 15 and chapter 16. We are from group 1. My name is Hairunisa Eka Putri, and there's also Almira Dita and Abraham Andrew. First, chapter 15. Next. I'm going to talk about basic entry decision. Okay, next. A firm contemplating foreign expansion must make three basic decisions. First, which foreign markets? There are so many countries in the world, and not all countries are potential for a firm contemplating foreign expansion. So we have to choose the country with potential. The choice must be based on assessment of a nation's long-run profit potentials. The long-run economic benefits of doing business in a country are a function of factors such as the size of the market, purchasing power of consumers in that market, and the likely future wealth of consumers, which depends upon economic growth rates. And also important factor is the value an international business can create an a foreign market. This depends on suitability of its product offering to that market and the nature of indigenous competition. Next, timing of entry. Entry is early when an international businesses enters a foreign market before other foreign firms, and late when it enters after other international business have already established themselves. They are commonly known as first mover advantage. There are several benefits as first mover. First, the ability to preempt our rivals and capture demand by establishing a strong brand name. Second, the ability to build sales volume in that country and write down the experience curve ahead of rivals. Third, the ability of early entrants to create switching costs that tie customers into their products or services. There can also be this disadvantage. Disadvantage may give rise to pioneering costs. Pioneering costs arise when the business system in a foreign country is so different from that in home market that the enterprise has to devote considerable effort, time, and expense to learning the rules of the game. Last, the scale of entry and strategic commitments. Entering a market on a large scale involves the commitment of significant resources. Deciding to enter a foreign market on a significant scale is a major strategic commitment. Strategic commitments such as rapid large-scale market entry can have an important influence on the nature of competition in a market, while small-scale entry allows a firm to learn about foreign market while limiting the firm's exposure to the market. Okay, next slide. Entry modes. Next. Firms can use six different modes to enter foreign markets. First, exporting. Exporting is the sale of the product and services in foreign countries that are sourced or made in the home country. There are some advantages and disadvantages of exporting. Exporting has two distinct advantages. First, it avoids the often substantial cost of establishing a manufacturing operation in the country. Second, exporting may have a firm achieve experience curve and location economies, and also they have disadvantages. First, exporting from the firm's home base may not be appropriate if lower cost location for manufacturing the product can be found abroad. Second, exporting is that high transport costs can make exporting uneconomical. Three, tariff barriers can make exporting uneconomical. The threat of tariff barriers by host country government can make it very risky. Next slide. Next, turnkey projects. In turnkey project, the contractor agrees to handle every detail of the project for a foreign client, including the training of operating personnel. Turnkey projects are most common in the chemical, pharmaceutical, petroleum refining, and metal refining industries. Uh, Advantages of turnkey projects. First, earning great economic returns from valuable assets. The strategy is particular, is full, where FDI is limited by host government regulations. For example, the governments of many oil-rich countries have set out to build their own petroleum refining industry, so they have restrict the FDI in their oil refining sectors. Second, a turnkey strategy can also be less risky than conventional FDI. In a country with unstable political and economic environments, a longer term investment might be expose the firm to unacceptable political and or economic risks. Disadvantages of the turnkey projects. First, the firm that enters into a turnkey deal will have no long-term interest in the foreign country. This can be a disadvantage if that country sub exponentially proves that to be a major market for the output of the process that has been exported. Second, the firm that enters into a turnkey project with a foreign enterprise may inadvertently create a competitor. Third, if the firm's process technology is a source of competitive advantage, then selling this technology through a turnkey project is also selling a competitive advantage to potential and or actual competitors. Next, licensing. An arrangement licensing is an arrangement whereby a licensor grants the rights to intangible property to another entity for a special period, and in return the licensor receives a royalty fee from the licensee. Intangible property includes patents, inventions, formulas, processes, designs, copyrights, and trademarks. The advantages of this licensing: first, the firm doesn't have to bear the development costs and risks associated with opening a foreign market. Licensing is very attractive for firms lacking the capital to develop operation overseas. Second, licensing is also often used when a firm wishes to participate in a foreign market to is prohibited from doing so by barriers to investment. This is advantages of licensing. First, it doesn't give a firm to the tight control of manufacturing, marketing, and strategy that is required by for realizing experience curve and location economies. Licensing typically involves each licensee setting up its own production operation. Second, competing in a global market may require a firm for to coordinate strategic moves across countries by using profit earned in one country to support competitive attacks in another. Third, licensing is the risk associated with licensing technological know-how to foreign companies. Technological know-how constitutes the basic of many multinational firms' competitive advantage. Most firms wish to maintain control over how their know-how is used, and a firm can quickly lose control over its technology by licensing it. Next. Franchising is similar to licensing, although franchising tends to involve longer term commitments than licensing. Franchising is basically a specialized form of licensing, which the franchisor not only sells intangible property to the franchisee, but also insists that the franchisee agree to abide by strict rules as to how it does business. Advantages of franchising is the firm is relieved to of many the costs of and risks and of opening of foreign market on its own. This creates a good incentive for the franchisee to build a profitable operation as quickly as possible. This then disadvantages of franchising is significant. Disadvantage of franchising is quality control. The foundation of franchising arrangements is that the firm's brand name conveys a message to consumers about the quality of the firm's product. Next. Joint ventures entails establishing a firm that is jointly owned by two or more otherwise independent firms. A joint venture with a foreign firm has long been a popular mode for entering a new market. Advantages of joint venture. First, a firm benefits from a local partner's knowledge of the host country. Second, the development cost and or risks of opening a foreign country are high. Third, political consideration make joint venture the only feasible and remote. The disadvantages of joint venture. First, a firm that enters into joint venture risks giving control of its technology to its partner. Second, a joint venture doesn't give a firm that tight control over subsidiaries that it might uh, need to know need to realize experience curve or location economies. Third, key to conflict and battles for control between the investing firms. Next. Okay, uh, next, wholly owned subsidiaries. In wholly owned subsidiaries, the firm owns 100% of the stock. Establishing a wholly owned subsidiary in a foreign market can be done two ways. First, the firm either can set up a new operation in that country, often referred as a greenfield venture, or it can acquire an established firm in that host nation and use that firm to promote its product. The advantages of wholly owned subsidiaries. First, a wholly owned subsidiary will often be the preferred entry mode because it reduce the risk of losing control over that competence. Second, a wholly owned subsidiary give a firm tight control over operation in different countries. Uh, Third, a wholly owned subsidiary may be required of if a firm is trying to realize allocation and experience curve economies. The disadvantages of wholly owned subsidiary is the most costly method of serving foreign market from a capital investment. That's all for me. Next will be continue by my friend. Thank you.
Okay, next up is how we select an entry mode. Next. Okay, now we're going to talk about core competencies and entry mode. The optimal entry mode for these firms depends to some degree on the nature of their core competencies. A distinction can be drawn between firms whose core competency is in technological know-how and those whose core competency is in management know-how. The first one is technological know-how. If a firm's competitive advantage is based on control over proprietary technological know-how, licensing, and joint venture arrangement should be avoided if possible to minimize the risk of losing control over the technology. Whereas the management know-how, the competitive advantage of many service firms is based on management know-how. For example, like McDonald's and Starbucks. Next. Next one is pressures for cost reduction and entry mode. The greater the pressures for cost reductions are, the more likely a firm will want to pursue some combination of exporting and wholly owned subsidiaries. By manufacturing in those locations where factor conditions are optimal, and then exporting to the rest of the world, a firm may be able to realize substantial location and experience curve economies. The firm might then want to export the finished product to marketing subsidiaries based in various countries. The subsidiaries will typically be wholly owned and have the responsibility for overseeing distribution in their particular countries. Next. Next is greenfield venture or acquisition. Next. The pros and cons of acquisitions. The first one are the pros. The first is um, acquisitions are quick to execute. The second one is by doing acquisitions, we can preempt our competitors. And the third one is by doing acquisitions, they are less riskier than greenfield ventures. Whereas the cons of acquisitions, the first one is overpaying. The firm may overpay for the assets of the acquired firms. The second one is there may be some culture clash or differences between both parties. And the third one's the first may have some miscalculations on their projections. Next. Whereas the pros and cons of the greenfield ventures, the pros is by doing greenfield ventures, the firm could have a greater ability to control some of their actions, and their cons. The first one is by doing greenfield ventures, they are slower to establish. Second one is very risky, and the third one are a lot. There are a lot of uncertainties. Next. The fifth one is strategic alliances. Strategic alliances are cooperative agreements between potential or actual competitors. Next. Here are some advantages of strategic alliances. The first one is facilitate entry into the foreign market. The second one is to share the fixed costs and associated risk. The third one is bring together complementary skills and assets. And the fourth one is to establish technological standards. Next. Whereas the disadvantages of strategic alliances, the first one is they can give competitors a low cost route to new technology and markets, and the second one is if the firms are not be careful, the firm can give away more than it receives. Next, thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to chapter 16, which is exporting, importing, and counter trade. So the first one that we're going to talk about is how to improve export. So how companies seek export opportunities, we can find it first. The problem. So the problem is uh, that exporting is simply the lack of knowledge of the opportunities available. So identifying export chances is made even more difficult by the fact that there are over 200 countries with completely different cultures. Therefore, firms are sometimes find it very difficult to pursue export opportunities when confronted with such complexity and diversity. And therefore, how do we overcome this? So companies must collect information. The way to overcome is only to collect information. And also another thing that they can do is to hire export management companies or EMCs, or maybe some countries provide direct help to businesses. So an international comparison about regarding exporting is there are three countries. The first one is Germany. In Germany, the government alongside other trade associations and commercial banks, they gather information to help small firms identify export opportunities. While in Japan, the Japanese Ministry of International Trade and Industry, they always on the lookout for export opportunities. In addition to that, many Japanese companies are linked to the Sogo Sosha, which is the Japan's great trading houses. And Sogo Sosha has offices all around the world, and they aggressively seek out export opportunities for their connected companies, either the companies are big or small. While in the United States, they are relatively information disadvantaged. It means that in terms of exporting, they are behind the other two companies because they have no idea where to seek that export opportunity. And now we're going to look at the export condition in Indonesia. So Indonesia's main trading partners are Japan, China, Singapore, and South Korea. Indonesia's company is relatively different than our neighbors because we are largely driven by domestic activity rather than export. But the most important export commodities for Indonesia is oil and gas, minerals, crude palm oil, electrical appliances, and rubber products. Therefore, the government goal to increase export activities for Indonesia's company can be selection of leading food commodities, procedural simplification to reduce costs and time, and the last one is economic diplomacy and increased market access. So now we're going to talk about how to utilize export management companies or EMCs. So one of the many ways for first-time exporters to identify those opportunities associated with exporting and also to avoid many pitfalls is to hire an EMCs or export management company. EMCs are expert specialists that act as the export marketing department or international department for their client firms. And a good EMC will have many networks among the world and also aware of the local business regulations, have multi-cultural employees, have a good knowledge of different businesses and more, so that uh, the exporter can choose wisely uh, that the EMC that they prefer. And each of the EMCs specialize in particular industries and areas of the world. Therefore, exporters should check carefully a number of EMCs that meet their criteria. Uh, there are two types of EMCs. The first one is they start export operations with the understanding that the firm will take over after they are established. And the second one is they start services with the understanding that the EMC will have continuing responsibility for selling the firm's products. So for expert strategy, there are some tips that can be helpful to export successfully. The first one is hire an EMC or an experienced expert consultant. The second one is to focus on one market or a few markets only at the beginning. And the third one is enter a foreign market on a small scale. The fourth one is recognize the time and managerial commitment involved in building expert sales. The fifth one is allocate a lot of attention to building relationships with local distributors or customers. And the sixth one is hire local personnel. The seventh one is proactive about seeking expert opportunities. And the last one is consider the option of local production. Now we're going to talk about export and import financing. So, because firms engage in international trade, they will have trust issue because they are forced to trust somebody that they may have never seen or maybe they may have never heard of. Therefore, there is some lack of trust. This lack of trust is caused by the distance between the two parties. In this case, is the exporters and importers, and by the problems of using an undeveloped international legal system and enforce contractual obligations. Therefore, there can be some trust issues. And also due to the lack of trust between the two parties, each of exporters and importers, they have their own preferences as to how the transaction should be configured. Therefore, we are going to talk about some transaction while doing export and import. And the exporters usually favor to receive payment before shipping goods, while the importers prefer to receive goods first before payment. And in order to build that trust between parties, they use a third party that is trusted by both of them, and usually it is reputable bank to act as an intermediary. So this is the illustration of using a third party. So the first one is when the importer obtains bank promise to pay on importer's behalf. And the second one is bank promises exporter to pay on behalf of importer. And then the third one is when exporter ships to the bank, trusting bank's promise to pay. And the fourth one is bank pays exporter. And the fifth one is bank gives merchandise to importer. And the last one is importer pays the bank. Now, the first transaction that they can use is letter of credit or LC. So LC is issued by a bank at the request of an importer and states the bank will pay a specified sum of money to a beneficiary, normally the exporter, on presentation of a particular specified document. Now, the great advantage of this system is that both the importer and the exporter are likely to trust the reputable bank, even if they do not trust each other. And once the exporter has seen a letter of credit, it knows that it is guaranteed payment and will ship the merchandise. Also, an exporter may find that having a letter of credit will facilitate obtaining pre-export financing. As for the importer, it does not have to pay for the merchandise until the documents have arrived and unless all conditions stated in the letter of credit have been satisfied. But there is also some disadvantages or some drawbacks for the importer when doing letter of credit. The first one is because it must pay the bank for the letter of credit, and in addition to that, since the letter of credit is a financial liability against the importer, it may reduce its ability to borrow funds for other purposes. The next one is draft or bill of exchange. So a draft is, or sometimes referred as bill of exchange, is simply an order written by an exporter instructing an importer or an importer's agent to pay a specified amount of money at a specified time. So the person or business who initiates the draft is called the maker, which in this case is exporter, and the person or business who receives the draft is called the drawee, or in this case is the importer. And because due to the lack of trust, payment or formal promise like draft is required in international transactions. There are two categories of draft. The first one is side draft. So side draft is payable on presentation to the drawee, while time draft allows for delay in payment. For example, 30, 90, until 120 days. And usually it is negotiable. And there is bill of lading. So bill of lading is issued to the exporter by the common carrier transporting the merchandise. The bill of lading can also serve as security for cash advance to the exporter by its local bank prior to or during shipment and before the importer makes final payment. There are three purposes of bill of lading. The first one is a receipt. So as a receipt, the bill of lading indicates that the carrier has received the merchandise described on the face of the document. And as a contract, it specifies that the carrier is obligated to provide a transportation service in return for a certain change. And as document of title, it can be used to obtain payment or a written promise of payment before the merchandise is released to the importer. So this is the illustration of international trade transaction. Um, Now we are moving on to the case, which is entry strategy and strategic alliances, a case of Diebold. So the summary of the case is Diebold was in the manufacturing of automatic teller machines, or ATMs, wherein the firm used to manufacture ATMs in country USA, its home country, and used to sell the product in various countries using distribution agreements with other firms. Later, the firm started its own distribution network to reach the market more deeply. To achieve more success, the firm also started its manufacturing units at suitable nations so as to offer customized products to the local customers. Owing to the different tasks and activities desired by different customers from the ATMs, the firm started producing ATMs that offers desired services to the customers. Later, the firm also entered in the manufacturing of electronic voting machines and become the largest player in this product across the world. So the first question of the case will be answered the other member.
The first question is why do you think they will choose this mode of expanding internationally, and what were the advantages and disadvantages of this arrangement? So Diebold manufactured its ATM machine in the US and sold them internationally via distribution agreements. First with Philips Electronics and then with IBM. They chose this strategy because by doing so, they didn't have to spend a lot of upfront costs to create the manufacturing and logistic overseas. So they can also focus on other essential things such as marketing and operations. And the disadvantages are the cooperation was not guaranteed to succeed, and the Diebold's profit are reduced to share profit with their other partners. Next.
Next, what do you think prompted Diebold to alter its international expansion strategy in 1997 and start setting up wholly owned subsidiaries in most markets? Why do you think the company favored acquisition as an entry mode? They both wasn't satisfied with their alliance with IBM in 1997. They also believe that now they had enough of experience and expertise to operate their business internationally themselves. With this in hand, they thought that buying shares from IBM and wholly owning subsidiaries in most markets allowed them to attain greater market shares by gaining direct control over distribution. This also allowed the company to adapt better to local markets, and there were many differences in the different market in the way that products and services were used. They both therefore acquire local manufacturing presence, which facilitated local customization and drove forward sales. The company favored acquisition as an entry mode since it permitted to generate cost efficiency through economies of scale. Then increase the value generation, revenue, market shares, and reduce the cost of capital. The robot acquisition also reduced tax and were beneficial entering new markets when introducing new products and gain higher competitiveness.
So the next question is, Diebold entered China via a joint venture as opposed to a wholly owned subsidiary. Why do you think it did this? Diebold's new strategy, which is launched in the late 1990s, was aimed towards markets where the expanding middle class which is beginning to develop a fresh demand for ATM. While the corporation adopted an acquisition strategy to quickly establish itself in Brazil and Europe, it was forced to switch gears in China. Diebold opted to form a new distribution and manufacturing joint venture in which it maintained a majority stake because there were no feasible acquisition choices. And the last question is, Diebold pursuing standardization strategy or a localization strategy? Do you think this choice of strategy has affected its choice of NGMO, and how? Diebold is likely adopting a localization strategy because people use ATMs differently in different countries. For instance, ATMs are mostly used for banking in the United States, and in certain nations, though, ATMs are used to protect returns and distribute their tickets. As a result, Diebold has built manufacturing operations in a number of areas in order to be closer to key markets. And additionally, the corporation has adopted an acquisition strategy to acquire business with local market experience. So that is our presentation from Group 10. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.